Hello again from China. My name is Dave, and it would appear the Kavanaugh Saga has taken another turn that I want to talk about. And that this turn is the one of comportment, Mr. Kavanaugh's comportment. If you support Mr. Kavanaugh, you don't have an issue with his comportment. If you don't support Mr. Kavanaugh, then of course you have an issue with his comportment. As we all know now, it's all become a very political process, this process of advise and consent. And while the media, and there seems to be this frenzy of discussion about his comportment, I think it's distracting us from a bigger issue. By all measures, Mr. Kavanaugh, and let's take this allegation of assault and put that over here for a minute. Let's take, after the allegation, let's take Mr. Kavanaugh's professional history and just look at that for a minute. By everyone's account, he's always been thoughtful, calm, measured, reasonable. 30 years, this is the man. Then, last week, he becomes very angry, very animated, and now his comportment is an issue. We shouldn't be talking about whether his comportment is justified or not. His comportment is indicative of a broken system. How is it that the system of advise and consent drives a reasonable, rational, thoughtful, calm man for 30 years to this level of anger? The process is not designed to enrage candidates. It's simply to advise and consent. And I submit to you the reason it's done, we've gotten here, is very, very simple: politics. The system is corrupted. Now, I put out another video, and it's called Kavanaugh Appointment Saga, and I offer 6 specific ideas. But all of those ideas will require quite a lot of discussion, and in some cases, perhaps constitutional changes. After seeing what I'm seeing the last 2 days and realizing that we're just gotten so far out of hand, we're pushing good men to rage. That's a problem. We should all be concerned about that. There will be other Supreme Court nominees. We can't afford to push them all to rage. So what's happening right now can either be the beginning of a very horrible path, or it can be a lesson that we need to learn from. And I choose the latter. I'd like to make it the latter. So here we go. I'm going to offer a solution that can be done in the Senate immediately, because the advise and consent role is in the Constitution, but it doesn't say exactly how to do that. The Senate sets their rules for doing that. And the Senate should make 2 fundamental rule changes. Rule number 1, from now on, all hearings in which there are cameras, all questions must pertain to qualifications of the appointed position only, or the prospective position only. In this case, let's look at your legal history, your formal training for law. Let's look at your bench findings, or your bench rulings, and how have your decisions either conformed with or been against the Constitution of the United States of America. That's all they can ask their questions about. They can focus on advise and consent. If an outside allegation comes in against the nominee, then it goes to the respective and the proper law enforcement authority. And that's it. The rule for the Senate: they cannot talk about the allegation to anyone in the press for any reason. Someone says, "Hey, Senator Joe, what do you think about this allegation? Do you think he's innocent?" Can't talk about it. That's out of my purview. I will lose my job if I talk about it. And that should be the rule. Anyone that violates that rule is automatically expelled from the Senate, period. No ifs, no ands, no buts. The Senate has to start acting the way we tell them to behave. And we want the Constitution to be followed and respected. Leaking, talking to the press about what you think, that's not the Constitution. That's not the role of the Senate. You can step away as a Senate member of the Judiciary Committee and say, "I'm going to resign from the committee, so now I can talk to you." But you can't do both. That's the rule. Rule number 2 then gets to the allegation itself. So now we have a law enforcement agency working on the allegation, developing guilt or innocence. Now, if it's something pretty severe, obviously it may mean having to stop the whole process until the law enforcement agency comes up with a conclusion. But if it's something that law enforcement agency can resolve with basically a report, like a police report, here's what we're hearing has happened, and it's not as serious that it may not go to a criminal court case, then it simply becomes information for the Senate to say, okay, I'm going to use this information, and based off it, I'm going to say no. Or based off this, I'm going to say yes. That's the consent portion of their responsibility. Not to comment on it, not to say, go back and reinvestigate or check this person. Their role is not investigators, the Senate's role. So they should not be leading, managing, directing, or otherwise having any contact with the investigation if it comes to an investigation. That is done by law enforcement. They simply look at the findings of the law enforcement agency. And based off what they see, yep, I'm all for them. Nope, I don't want them. That's it. What people think about the allegation, what people think about the persons involved in the allegations, what people think about guilt or innocence means nothing to the confirmation process. Now, full disclosure, I happen to think Mr. Kavanaugh is not guilty of any wrongdoing. I think there's been some kind of mistake made on the charges of Dr. Ford. But we don't live in the United States of Dave, so we can't do what I want them to do. We don't live in the United States of Crazy Lady that gets in Jeff Flake's face. Or we don't live in the United States of Crazy Lady that gets in Senator Cruz's face. Or was it Mitch McConnell's face? There's so many crazy ladies get in front of senators' faces these days, I don't know. But we don't live in the United States of them. We live in the United States of America. We have a constitution to follow. And the process has been sorely damaged. Now, in the event that the report comes back and the Senate may have some questions for the nominee, all of the questions from the allegations concerning allegations are done on paper without any camera, without any reporter, without any radio, without any of that crap. It is, in my opinion, the press, the visibility of the press, getting in front of a camera is a drug for some of these politicians. And allowing them to get in front of a camera to say what they think and feel and develop a national following is oftentimes what they want more than the real process. So we need to take that drug away from them because right now they're proving they can't handle it on their own. Okay. So that's the basic two rules. Fundamental rule number one, the Senate cannot deal with any allegation. Outside allegations go through the respective law enforcement agency, and they may not comment on them. If they do comment on those allegations, they lose their position in the Senate, period. Rule number two, whatever they decide, whatever they see from the findings or the report or whatever comes to them from the law enforcement agency, they may ask questions to the nominee, but it's all done on paper. There's no face. Are you sure you did? We lose all that nasty tone. We lose all the rhetoric. We simply have the questions, and they're generated, given to the nominee. That nominee responds. That's it. One-time answer, one-time response. If a senator can't make a decision of I want to support this role, or I don't want, or I want to support this candidate, this nominee, or I don't want to support this nominee, through that process, they don't belong on that Senate Judiciary Committee. That's it. That's the two new rules. The Senate can make those rules tomorrow. We are the only country on earth that still has, well, let me rephrase that. We have the freest speech as a nation than any other nation on earth. One of the reasons for that, in my opinion, the only reason for that, is the Constitution of the United States. We need to remember that is what we're about. One of the fundamental bricks, if you will, of the Constitution is we don't allow emotion to make our decisions as a government. We can do that on our own, but we can't allow emotions to drive our government. And right now, that is all that's driving our government. I'm hearing from everyone about American values. It's American value. Some people are saying, and a senator says, oh, women have a right to be believed. Another senator says, all men, shut up. This is an American value. Victims need to be heard. Victims need to be believed. Victims are always right. Wrong. No individual in our country has a right to be believed. Every individual in our country has a right to be heard. What should be believed is evidence. and up to a point of reasonable doubt. There's a lot of talk about this notion of innocence before guilt, presumed innocence, and that's a general notion of society, not just contained within a courtroom. But there's another notion that was espoused back in the 19th century and reiterated by Thurgood Marshall, I guess 50, 60 years ago now. He would rather, in his words, he would rather allow 100 guilty people to go free than to have one innocent person go to jail. The whole system of justice is trying to be as fair as possible to the accused. And to me, that is the biggest American value we're missing here. Just common, decent fairness. What you would want for yourself. No one would like to have these accusations be rubbed through the newspapers and all that garbage that goes with it. So let's focus on fairness. The system is badly broken. I'm encouraging everyone to look beyond your own politics and recognize that if we don't fix it, our nation is at risk. This is really, really serious stuff. It's not about Brett Kavanaugh. To me, it's not about abortion anymore. It's not about assault, sexual assault. Our Constitution is being damaged, and I fear it may be beyond repair. If we don't make some serious changes, if we don't really sit back and say, calm down, what's good for the country? Not what's good for me, not what makes me feel good, what is good for the country? And I'm one of those, I believe the Constitution is good for the country. Now, of course, if you believe the Constitution is not good for the country, you can ignore all of this garbage, because that's what it is, just garbage. But if you think the Constitution is important, and if you think basic, decent fairness is important, we need to start becoming more active in how we treat our senators. They should not be allowed to run rampant in front of TV cameras. And until they know how to control themselves, and again, the other six solutions I have for this issue are a little bit more detailed and provide and would require a lot more discussion. These two rules, the Senate could do tomorrow. They could simply do this on their own. So as an American electorate, we need to ask ourselves, where do we want the Constitution to be in our society? Somewhere over here, off to the side, or front and center. Okay, thanks a lot for listening. I did want to put a little plug in for my book. It's called Make It So. It's available at Amazon.com. I talk in that book about many issues that are plaguing our nation today and how they would be addressed if we looked at it from a perspective of our future counterparts in Star Trek. I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and they tend to use a lot of reason and logic in how they make their choices. They definitely remove emotions from their decisions. They have emotions, but they remove them from decisions. How would it look in our country if we did that? Anyway, hope you take a look at the book. Thanks for listening. Take care.